Welcome to PodSpot, the podcast where we explore the transformative power of HubSpot with industry experts and thought leaders. I'm Jon Pittham, founder of HubSpot consultancy Karman Digital, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Joe Fulton, a senior UX designer here at Karman Digital who leads our digital engagement team. And we're going to discuss all things conversion rate optimization, or CRO for short. Welcome, Joe. How are you today?
Real, I'm really good, thanks, John. Good to be on the podcast. I was loving your intro. Felt like
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you. I like to big up our guests where I can. And this is your first time on the podcast, is that right?
It is my first time, yeah. Hopefully the first of many.
I'm sure it will be the first of many. We usually have a lot of external guests on, so it's actually nice to have a colleague on the podcast today. And you've said that the dogs are downstairs. They're not around your feet at the moment.
There'll be no interference today. The dogs are downstairs. They won't be jumping up. I know Daphne likes to make an appearance every now and again, but no, she's not coming on the podcast today.
Okay, so this really isn't about traffic per se in terms of acquisition of traffic. This is about when someone lands on the website, how do you further them on that journey on the website to do whatever you'd like them to do, which is obviously sign up or even actually continue their journey through the website, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's a really good way of looking at it. And it's about making the most of the traffic that you've got, not about increasing traffic. And I mean, we've seen it time and time again where we've had clients which have come in. We all know like the really big example that we've got where they had, thousands of viewers, but the bounce rate was absolutely astronomically high, and they weren't actually getting anything out of that traffic which they had. So what an actual better option was to reduce that traffic number down and actually go the other way, decrease bounce rates and improve conversion rate off the back of it. And then off the back of that, you then see actually a better performing website, which kind of sounds counterintuitive when you think about it. We always sort of bred to believe that we have this, idea that more traffic is always better. And that's not necessarily the case if the traffic isn't high converting or it isn't performing as well as you'd want it to.
Yeah. And I think if that's the case, you're thinking about, I think the traffic when the new site went live dropped by about 30-40%, which actually we knew would do. But actually conversion rate and new contacts coming to the system, that target audience increased.
Yeah, that's correct. And as well, funnily enough, although it dropped in certain areas, the traffic, it actually showed that the traffic that was on there was finding the way through the site. So the views on the contact page actually went up. So although traffic was down on a whole, views on the contact page was up, conversion rates were up, contacts generated were up, off less traffic. So I think that's really a great example of the impact that CRO can have and how sometimes in terms of traffic and views, looks can be a little bit deceiving as well.
Yeah. And I think this is quite interesting, isn't it? Because often the vanity metric is traffic volume, not conversion. And we do find that, particularly, leadership teams kind of look at those headline figures and arguably there might be a balance of resources to be played in terms of investing into, acquisition of visitors compared to conversion of those visitors. And actually should more time and effort be invested into that conversion piece rather than just increasing the volumes. And we know that, paid ads is becoming more challenging, arguably more expensive on some platforms. And therefore this focus on conversion, has got to be really important as part of the mix.
Yeah. I think that is exactly, I mean, I'm coming at it from probably a little bit of a biased view in terms that I would say, let's always focus on the UX, let's always focus on the conversion, and perhaps let's not take as heavier look on the traffic. I think the balanced approach is they're both obviously really, really important. You can't have conversions without traffic. But yeah, I think making the most of CRO and actually understanding it and getting the best out of it, and perhaps not focusing so much on the vanity aspects of the traffic is probably a really, really great way for businesses to realign themselves, actually.
Yeah, no, I get that. And I guess, so let's dig into it a little bit further then. And most people, when they think about conversion rate optimization, probably think about A/B testing. That's kind of the A/B testing on a landing page running from ads is kind of CRO 101, I guess. But thinking about that, then how can businesses optimize their conversion rates? Using HubSpot's analytics and tools.
Yeah, there's all different ways. You kind of touched upon the first one there, which might be sort of the 101, if you like, which is the A/B testing. Off the back of that, you could potentially look at something a little bit. I think it as a better option, but you've got adaptive testing as well, which is an AI tool which HubSpot have, which uses multivariate testing. And the way that works is actually really intelligent, because it stops. So when you do an A/B test, for example, you kind of potentially, until you make the call between which variant you want to win, you're potentially wasting a lot of conversions. Whereas because an adaptive test adapts to the traffic and adapts to what's converting, you don't have that same wastage in terms of conversion. So it's constantly optimizing as the test runs. So that's almost like a step up, and it allows you to test maybe up to 5 variants, I think, on HubSpot. So that's a really, really nice other option if you don't want to do A/B testing. That only obviously works with websites. It doesn't work with things like email, because you can't adapt an email. Obviously, once you've sent out, you can't adaptive test that. And then obviously after that, you could potentially start getting really detailed and digging into HubSpot's analytics. Obviously, the analytics are really robust, but you can create dashboards and also track conversion rate KPIs as well, which is really good inside the analytics. Another thing which you can potentially look at is smart content and personalisation. I know this is a big one which you like, but HubSpot does have smart content tools which enables you to divvy up your audience by segment and create a more engaging, personalised experience for them. And then obviously the new one which they've brought out, which I can't say I know loads about, but they've got predictive lead scoring now, which obviously that just helps you prioritise leads and focus resources on more high probability prospects, really.
Okay, so going a bit deeper into smart content and conversion rate optimization, then what are we talking about here? Are we just talking about CTA buttons? Are we talking about text copy? Are you talking about forms? What should you be testing, and from a CRO perspective? How far do you go with it? And my guess is you can get carried away. And where do you draw the line? In relation to how much you actually do.
Interesting question. There is definitely an argument. There is definitely an argument, especially around Spark content, if we're delving into that particular area, that you can go too deep with it in terms of, I think we always have to have this value question in our minds, don't we, about like, is it worthwhile for the client for us to create 7 different pieces of text for something? How many people are going to see this piece of text? If one person's only going to see the piece of text, then you could argue realistically there's possibly not much value in us going away and doing that job. But definitely we do understand that creating personalized experiences for the audience increases engagement, and as a byproduct of that we get conversion. I think it is very sort of like, you kind of have to judge it off a few different aspects, whether that's the amount of traffic that page might receive, for example, the current conversion rate on that traffic, and how much you're expected to actually improve it by as well. And these different factors would then give you probably a good idea of whether or not you think it's worthwhile actually going to the lengths of optimizing that content, or which content you should be focusing on in terms of smart content. It goes without saying, if you've got a nice big hero section at the top and people from 7 different countries visiting it, then it probably makes sense to optimize that hero section so that it's a bit more personalized for the people from the different countries. I think that's a really basic example, but that's sort of where you'd be wanting to use it and looking to use it for.
So I guess the real piece there is the initial research bit to understand where the most value can be gained. Using analytics, using tools like Mouseflow and Hotjar, heat mapping, etc. I guess that if you're seeing drop off on one point, or you're seeing all the traffic, or a large percentage of traffic and high volume clicking a certain button, do you improve on that piece, I guess, or that element of the web page. But I think that research bit, from what you're saying then, and understanding where the most value is a really important starting point.
Yeah, and I think that is like really, really one of the most common mistakes generally that businesses make with when they start doing CRO, or perhaps it is that they don't even start doing it. And it's something that HubSpot actually really does quite well. And there's ways which HubSpot can help people improve or get rid of those mistakes out of the CRO. So lack of data-driven decisions making, for example, not leaning into HubSpot's analytics to actually provide them the right data, whether that's, looking at bounce rates or looking at conversion rates on a page. There's also the aspect that perhaps people rely on assumptions a little bit too much, so they don't test things whenever they start. They go. We see it time and time again, don't we? People look at a page and go, "Oh, I think this could do with snazzing up a little bit," or that's the classic one that a lot of designers.
I'm going to jump in here because I've sat in many meetings where time has been spent arguing over where a button should be placed or the layout of a page, etc. And all of that is often based on assumptions. When arguably the best thing to do if you don't have any data, it might be a new website or a new proposition you're putting live, if you don't have data to inform the decision beyond bid experience, arguably the best thing to do is make something live, gather the data as quickly as possible, and then use adaptive testing or change it pretty rapidly to get you to a good position.
Exactly that. And it is literally something which comes up, like you say, time and time again. And the amount of time wasted from meetings, like you said, and you have to listen to one person versus the other person, or the amount of, even if you're just looking at it from a data point of view, the amount of perhaps conversions that have been wasted because someone's made an assumption and changed something on the site willy-nilly and not bothered doing like an A/B test on it, or not actually looked into the data backing it, but they might already be changing a page which is really high converting, or changing a page which actually really works for the audience and resonates well with them because of their own personal assumption, rather than actually looking at what's best for the user.
So thinking about then design, how can user experience and kind of these design-driven approaches improve CRO within HubSpot?
Yeah, I think a really, really great way of looking at user experience, or you'd start really at the friction points. So what is it that's stopping a user from converting on your site? Now, generally, the first point of friction, or it might be the last point of friction, I suppose, depending on which way you're coming from it, but it'll be your form. So streamlining your forms, analysing your form drop-off points and seeing whereabouts it is that people are getting up to on your form is a really great way of doing this. Now, you might use something like mouse flow to actually analyse and see where people are clicking on your form as well. But streamlining those, condensing them, shortening them, making them a little bit easier, perhaps not asking for as much information, can be a really great way to aid conversion. If you have got a really beefy form that you think, we need all this information, then maybe perhaps going down the HubSpot route of using the multi-step tool, the multi-step form tool, and actually making the use out of that is a really good option as well, and actually breaking your form down into separate steps so it's a bit more digestible for the user to take on can be a great way of doing it. Just mentioned mouse flow, using heat maps. I know heat maps aren't actually in HubSpot at the moment, but we know that you can integrate with third-party companies like Hotjar and what have you, to analyze sort of like user behavior and where it is they're perhaps getting down on a page. We see it time and time again. Super long pages, 50% of the audience drops off at about 20% down the page, and the rest of the page is viewed by next to nobody. And there's a lot of key information at the bottom of that page, or there might even be a call to action or a form as well down there, which is stopping conversion too.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And you just mentioned about forms there. Arguably, that's often a starting point for people, isn't it, in terms of improving conversion forms? One of the things I did see work really well recently was where actually setting expectations really important in terms of form completion. There's nothing worse than you think you're signing up for a newsletter and then suddenly it's asking you for data around your size of business and other bits and pieces, and you're kind of going and where you live and actually, whoa, hold on a minute, that's not what I expected. So drop off point. So I think it's not just necessarily arguably about the form itself, but actually how that experience is set up, going back to that broader user experience of setting expectation, the text, the copy, it all plays into this, doesn't it?
Yeah, and consistent messaging actually, and how we speak to the audience can be a real big driver for conversion, not just in terms of forms and us being open and honest with what it is we're expecting the user to fill out and what it is that they're going to get off the back of the form, but even the messaging down the page. How do we communicate benefits? How do we talk about this? And is that messaging consistent across different pages as well is super important. HubSpot again actually does have an answer to this. It sounds like a HubSpot advert, this, doesn't it? But
it is a HubSpot podcast, Joe. It's okay to talk about
HubSpot podcast. Yeah. But HubSpot obviously has the brand AI built in now, so you can get a lot better consistent messaging across pages, and HubSpot can do it for you, so it is handy. But that can be a real big driver for conversion as well.
So what practical tips would you offer for someone looking to use HubSpot and drive kind of CRO focused campaigns?
Yeah, I suppose I'll probably go back on my smart comment, my smart content comment, which I made earlier on. And I'd probably say just get into the habit of testing, and that will mean testing everything, whether right through from subject lines to full scale designs. Really just to bring testing and using data to the forefront of your mind. Stop relying on assumptions and start relying on data. And that means you've got to gather that data. So start testing. And start looking at optimizing lead nurturing with personalized follow-ups. And I think this can be a really easy one as well to actually implement. And I think we can split this up as well. So rather than creating out like a full workflow, although that might be the end goal, just start off with just personalizing first name and subject line, and then work up to perhaps if you submit an inquiry for a certain service, you get a lead nurturing campaign that caters, around that service which they've inquired towards, and they go into that. But just little baby steps first, you don't have to buy everything off in one go, but just start, doing these little bits and bobs to work up there. And then the next one would be to research your audience and understand them. So we kind of touched on that in the A/B testing. That's all part of it, but understand the viewing habits as well. So what devices are they viewing your site on? If you've got an audience which is primarily viewing your site on mobile, or your landing pages on mobile because they're landing from a pay-per-click campaign, which, might come from LinkedIn, and they're viewing that on the mobile, then optimize for those devices. Don't optimize for a desktop if 70% of your audience are on mobile. And also review mouse flow data constantly and understand where it is on the page that they're actually engaging with and optimize around that. And then I suppose another one that you could potentially do is start looking at smart content on a small scale and using smart CTAs that adapt potentially dependent on like the visitor's life cycle. So for example, if somebody's already signed up to a product, why not change the CTA to upgrade now, and little things like that. So it's actually more appropriate for where they are as like a customer. And I think going back to the first point, just to cycle back around, just regular monitor all the time, always be looking at the data, always be trying to get as much data as possible. And I think those little bits and bobs will move you on astronomically. And then the last bit of it will just be about sort of constant improvement incrementally.
Yeah. That's really good advice, Joe. And I think importantly as well is that gathering of data is fundamental to everything. And I guess there's probably some listeners here going, I'm not sure they get enough traffic, because I do think you do need enough traffic and enough sample data to be able to make rational decisions, logical decisions based on that data. There's, if you're only getting, 20 visitors a month to a landing page and you're trying to optimize that, well, that's pretty difficult. If you're getting 1,000 visitors, 2,000 visitors to a landing page a month, that's much easier to optimize for. So that kind of plays in a little bit, I guess.
I think that's really good point, actually, because viewing, especially if we're looking at things like quantitative data where we're relying on numbers. So, this could be like a bounce rate, a conversion rate. When we're looking at that kind of data, numbers are really important. And 30, 40 viewers is going to make a really tough decision about whether or not, a button is better here or there and it increases conversion. Like, it's just going to be really difficult. But there are forms of qualitative data which don't rely on numbers, which would still give you a decent little bit of data or a little bit of information which you might be able to play into. So things like mouse flow and heat maps, for example, they are qualitative. So they don't rely on huge numbers. They just rely on tracking trends. So 3 or 4 people or 5 people, 6 people on a heat map that are honed in on one area, you can probably make an assumption that for your audience, that is quite an important part of the page. So perhaps we can highlight that and move it in a different way. So I think a really, really great point, but I think there's ways around it if we're using different kinds of data as well.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point there, Joe. I like where your thinking is coming from there. The other thing I think is probably worth raising as well, and we hear this a lot when people say to us, well, what should the conversion rate be? And my view of that is, this is apples and pears stuff. Yes, we can get industry averages. I know HubSpot provide a lot of industry averages in terms of conversion rates, etc. But really, the best benchmarks are your own benchmarks. You can't compare your landing page with a competitor's landing page. The offer's slightly different, the brand's slightly different, the traffic sources might be slightly different. The best place to start in terms of benchmarking and trying to set objectives for improvement is your own data, rather than trying to compare with others. Is that a fair comment?
100%. Yeah, I think starting off with your own data and what it is you've got and improving that is your best bet. Because if you might see industry uh, averages at 7 or 8%, but they might not necessarily be reflective of your customer base. Yeah. You might have a slightly different customer base than the rest of the industry. You might have a slightly older customer base that perhaps doesn't work online as well, or perhaps they prefer referrals and this kind of thing. So your averages might be slightly lower because of that. So yeah, I think working to your own benchmarks and looking to improve them and looking internally at what you can improve is way better. And if you think that something is really, really suffering, or it has got quite a lower average than what you'd expect, why not do a wholesale change and test that against it instead? You A/B testing generally, a lot of the time we can focus in on really minute details to try and push averages up. But if you think that averages are already really low, why not go with a wholesale change and see if that has any impact or not? There's nothing to say you can't do it, but again, it's just all about testing and actually using the data to drive that.
I love that. So literally, just arguably, you could do it with your homepage. You just completely change your homepage to be something else and try it. It's an experiment. We talk about experiments a lot. Lead into experiments, quick experiments that can drive some data and results.
Yeah, the important thing is not to waste time actually talking about something, and actually just get something live and put it in front of your audience and see how they respond to it, and actually get some live feedback of it. That's way more valuable than 5 meetings talking about the chairman's favourite colour.
Yeah, definitely. So core focus around data, gathering data, quick experimentation. Don't be afraid to go big with change, as well as those iterative, smaller changes. Lots of great advice in there. Appreciate that. So, Joe, then just wrapping up, then final question for you: what's coming down the pipe with HubSpot then that's going to aid and improve CRO for clients?
Well, I suppose just sort of like a top level sort of thing. You've got more advanced AI tools. So it's at HubSpot, we know, is with Agent AI and Breeze AI, they're enhancing the AI driven capabilities, and in particular around personalisation and content creation. We know they're going to be doing lead predictive scoring, which we briefly mentioned earlier. And then so we're expecting more powerful integrations to help with CRO in that aspect, even predictive analytics as well for conversions potentially. Deeper integration with third-party tools. We know that that's always coming with HubSpot, and we know that they're always leaning into that and trying to expand their own ecosystem. So they're going to be improving their ability to integrate with tools like Google Analytics, Shopify, Salesforce, and all those different main platforms as well that people use, and enhanced reporting capabilities. So they're going to carry on. We know they're going to carry on continuing improving custom reporting features and allowing for more granular insights into conversion data. Hopefully that comes with some new metrics which might help us evaluate, for example, whether how valuable a session is to a company, and more granular little bits like that.
I thought for a moment we were going to go through this podcast, Joe, without you quoting session value. That is one of your favourite metrics. I mean, really important metric, but just explain session value because I love it when you talk about session value.
It does get me excited, which is really nerdy. So session value is taking how much money a website has generated and then dividing it by the number of sessions. Now, this is really, really important, especially from a CRO point of view, because let's say your website sales go up astronomically. It'll look like your performance of your website has gone up, but your traffic might have also risen astronomically to get you there. Now, your website could potentially be performing worse than what it was when it was making less money, because on a case-by-case basis, each session is worth less. That might be customers buying smaller value items. It might just be that they're not perhaps getting to the places that they need to be. But and it's about diving deeper into data, essentially, isn't it? And not just taking the data for what it says and coming away from vanity metrics and actually analysing and understanding it. Like less sessions and a higher return means that you're getting more profitability from your sessions. It means you're converting better and you're getting the better option out of them. So yeah, it's one of my favourite metrics. HubSpot doesn't do it yet, but I'm sure if they listen to this, they'll see the importance of it and implement it.
If you're listening, HubSpot, there, put that at the top of your sprint list. So yeah. And also important for B2B as well, particularly in, larger deals, etc. Then, obviously you can track deal won rates and all the rest of it. And pulling that back into session value is really important. Joe, it's been an absolute pleasure today. Thank you for sharing all your knowledge. There's plenty in there to get people started. HubSpot, we know, is a great platform. Without question, AI is coming down the pipe, and data is at the heart of that, and analytics, etc., which all obviously plays into CRO capability. So much appreciate your time today, Joe. Thanks for sharing your knowledge with us.
More than welcome. Always a pleasure, never a chore.
So that's a wrap for today's episode of PodSpot. Join us next time as we delve into more topics surrounding all things HubSpot. Remember to subscribe for more episodes, drop us a line with any ideas you may have for future content, and do leave us a review if you enjoyed today's session. Thanks very much.